So, God, I've got a lot of questions. Now, it's interesting that with Wicked in the Divine and with Uber, you've got two series that are just about to come to an end. You can see that in, I mean, was that the intention? It clearly frees you up to do a lot more things now.
Yes, like sleeping. Uber, it's not deliberate, but it's, like put it, there's no way I could have possibly planned for that. Uber was started writing in 2008. Like it didn't launch until 2013? Maybe
Yeah, 2013.
Like, really that late? Oh no. And so in other words, it took forever to come out. It was from Avatar and it went through a variety of incarnations. Whilst WicDiv was conceived in 2014, we kind of, in our hearts of hearts, we kind of always knew how long it would be. Like we used to say it would be between 30 and 60 issues. Because you know, it always could have gone longer. And it's going to be 51 issues. So we're kind of right. Like it's 45 of the main series plus 6 specials it's going to be. And so that's like a considerable bunch of time. So yeah, when we realised the Uber and WicDiv were going to come to an end together, it's like, it just kind of did end my planning in terms of, okay, I'm not really having anything firm past, you know, early 2019. So that's kind of like, okay, what next? And then, you know, it's a thing that allows me to focus. And I do like the fact there's two such different books and two such big books kind of like having the full stop at the same time.
Well, they are different. I mean, it seems that very different approaches are, you know, I know that you famously wrote the 30,000 page Bible for Uber, but also...
Word, not page.
Words, sorry, words. But I also know, obviously, it's very well documented that Wicked and Divine came from a very different part of your life, or, you know, almost a very different cultural experience. With Uber then, that 30,000 word Bible, have you found that you've stuck to it relatively rigidly, or have you deviated in any ways?
Well, is it Clausewitz who said no plan survives contact with the enemy? I think, you know, so no. I mean, I was reading the actual Bible, which is, because it's like for those who don't know, a Bible is something they mainly have in television shows. The Bible defines everything about, like, the fundamental nature of the show, and then other writers can come on and use it. So Uber was kind of designed that, you know, abstractly someone else could write this. In actual practice, if anyone's played a role-playing game, my Bible's a bit more like my campaign manual. So like, this is my campaign manual, and this is the material I was going to run for the players, as in the readers. And by definition, same as any kind of role-playing group, stuff changed. And it kind of, as I went through, stuff I planned in 2008 was 2008 me, that's a decade younger than me, and like, hopefully I've learned some stuff then. And if I haven't learned stuff, at least I've changed considerably. So significant things about how I approach in big beats, significantly different. At the same time, for all the thought you put into something in a document then, the more you think about it constantly over like a decade, you realise stuff. I mean, Uber is a World War II like superhero story, and that's, in the original Bible, I don't think I had Britain drop out the war. In fact, I'm pretty sure, but when I was actually getting to that point of like about 5 trades in, I looked at the kind of Bible and Britain does nothing for the rest of the war now. And so it would actually refocus the story in a key way if Britain capitulated. So it's that kind of thing. And it's like, that's a big, large, sweeping thing. And there's much smaller things, like in terms of like vague, horrific fates of people. I mean, Uber, all the main characters, and you know, who I consider the main characters tend to be slightly different from the readers do.
Go on then, who are the main characters for you?
Well, like the three German battleships,
yeah.
Stephanie, and that's, oh yeah, Maria. So those 5 are the backbone of the book. And other characters are kind of quite secondary, like Leah and Turing, and various other people. They became more important as the story went along, but they were kind of, their fate was always more open than the main characters, and the main characters were kind of nailed in to begin with.
Well, you seem to do in all of your, you know...
It's worth noting is that that's an example of changing. So when in this final year of Uber, anytime I write a character, I'm thinking, are they going to survive this scene? So it's that kind of like, I'm looking for the place where, okay, how can we've seen 40 issues of them, what actually is the thing the reader needs to take away at this point? And it makes it kind of interesting. Like characters like Razor had something awful happen to him 2 episodes ago, and that came to me when I was writing it in terms of, oh yeah, that makes sense of his arc, because he's been a character who's been suffering PTSD for the entire story. And that's, of course, and there's definitely some readers who A, don't get that, and B, consider him a coward. And it's like, no, and this is like you're failing to even grasp the level of horror that these people are working under. Anyway, you were saying.
But no, it's a very horrific book, I must admit. It's clearly one of the more horrific things you've written, but it's very dense as well. But I suppose, still staying on this idea of changing, you seem to still be very voracious in reading about World War II, and I suspect therefore you might pick up a book tomorrow and think, oh, I've not thought about that. Would that then influence slightly where Uber's going? I know you've clearly got a finishing point. It'd be interesting how you get there.
They're all grace notes. Like say, I'm always, I'm a writer, ergo I'm a reader. So like, there's always kind of stuff you're picking up, and even because World War II history is kind of in the news, it's in the front pages. Like there's stuff, the few years when they translated the German book about drug abuse in the Nazis, like that stuff I already knew. Which I consider was I was kind of got a bit weirded by people being, oh, that's not news. I learned that from Lester Bangs. But at the same time, there's little bits you go, oh no, that's a different take. And the problem, like, I did a book called Free for Image, which is which is a Spartan story about the Helots. The Helots were the Spartan slave people, and the Spartans treated them very badly, including the fact they hunted them. They had open season on Helots, and I did an entire story about essentially 3 Helots being hunted. The thing there is there's very little history about Sparta. And the Spartan...
Very Spartan, isn't it?
Yes, very good. And it's mainly written by the Athenians, who were their enemies, or people 100 years later, who kind of glorified the Spartans. So, and you certainly get no detail about the Helots, because Helots were slave people, and therefore didn't really write history. The working class don't get to write the history. So where that book was, the research then was intense. To write even a single line, you have to expand out enormously. Conversely, World War II there's so much information there, you're never going to get it right, because there's too much of it. And there's also, even if you get it right, people will disagree with you. I have a very Marxist materialistic take on World War II. As in I'm really about the materialism. Conversely, there's definitely people who are kind of like, oh, the book's wrong. No, the book isn't wrong. I just disagree with you.
And I'm the author, so shut up.
But at the same time, there is a completely stuff I've got to. Like, there's research I got about Britain's material standing at the start of World War II, which changed my opinion about where the actual problem was in World War II, where the problem was in Britain, in terms of the British military forces. And then some of that's got worked in. I don't think those issues have dropped yet. No, issue 12 has dropped. No, issue 11 has dropped, and there's an entire bit where they're talking about investment in military spending. Yeah. It's like British military spending at the start of World War II was really high. They just spent it on stuff that didn't work, and like and there's no way of knowing that because the whole point of war is that war. Wars people discover very quickly those tactics work or don't work, and that's And if bombing worked as well as they thought it was going to do at the beginning of World War II, it would have been a completely different war. If the Blitzkrieg didn't work, so that kind of, and that's an example of some different sort of thinking. But there's lots of other minor bits, and you always try to work it in. I tell you what, I watched the amazing movie Death of Stalin recently.
Yes.
Which is astounding and bleak and very funny in an awful way. But it made me realise I wish I got Berrier in, as in Berrier being the main sort of secret police guy, and I've got him in a cameo in issue 15. But that kind of thing.
Well, you managed to put a lot in though, haven't you? I mean, it's very dense. Those first 27 issues only cover a few months. And I think, when I was reading it back to back this week, I didn't realise that. It's only when you can. I know you don't put dates in as much now, but at the time it was quite amazing that you're only seeing about 3 or 4 months, and you are learning about these characters in so many different ways as well. I mean, was that intentional?
It was the nature. Especially Early Uber. Early Uber was a sort of book where I worked out whether it was going to rain in Okinawa on that given day. And we're at the point now where we divulge from the timeline, so we have to be a bit more creative. And at least part of the reason why I've stopped doing dates as much is because there is often significant time differences between scenes. Like they kind of do it in Game of Thrones as well, just because you have the scenes in that order. That's what makes narrative sense. Versus there's and occasionally I use it to cheat, as in I failed to mention this scene is happening 3 months earlier, like issue when we went back to Hideki in Okinawa. That was this was 3 months ago.
Yeah. Well, isn't that?
It definitely. But yes, exactly as you say, it's kind of a really weird, intense period of time, and at least part of the aim of the book was, I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, and I hadn't watched or read Game of Thrones when I invented Uber, but then the point of Game of Thrones is a wide-scale strategic family drama thing. So in other words, you kind of see all the sides of the conflict, and characters can exist for literally decades before they even meet. And Uber was kind of similar in that Uber, this is a strategic style drama, as in we have viewpoint characters on all the sides, and at the higher level and the lower level, so you get to see the wide scale of the conflicts. And even now, that's kind of the fun thing about the last year. I use fun in a very quotation marks way with Uber, as the characters who I've been writing for, like I said, a decade, they're finally meeting. When Maria meets Leah at one point, it's that kind of like, these are two characters I just want to see what they do to each other. So yes, that would be the answer. And there's so much about the scale, because for me, like the World War II aspect was, I want to do something at the highest level about how people fought wars in that period and why, fascism is a kind of a very slow dissection of fascism in terms of why people believe it and why it's fundamentally evil. That was. The point of Uber is that, really.
But what I'm finding fascinating as you come into this last year, particularly in the recent issues, when you've got weapons that think, when you've got weapons that are sentient, we're beginning to see that in action and how their mindset and the way they've been treated on all sides as if they're nothing but weapons, that's coming more to the forefront, isn't it, in this last sort of year or so?
There's the kind of the weaponization of talent is a theme from Uber for me from the beginning. Like, it's one of those things like, you get sacked, who was the person who basically invented the Ubers, reporting to Hitler and saying, I did it for Germany, and all that. No, you did it for me. And at least part of the point is, talent misapplied eventually becomes much more evil. Hitler was incompetent. That's the thing is, Guderian, if Hitler didn't have some talented people in the German military, we would not be talking about Hitler today. In other words, people who are quote unquote good and just doing their jobs, and they're doing their jobs very well. If they're doing it for somebody who is fundamentally evil, they are enabling a much worse evil than that would be possible otherwise. So in other words, that also applies to the battleships, all the kind of characters, and a lot of the characters about not admitting they have responsibility for their actions. And it's kind of weird, like Uber eventually just becomes as a deconstruction of superhero work, it's ended up cycling round to the most core superhero statement of, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes, of course.
This is fundamentally what Spider-Man learned. And I wish, Hans Guderian learned it as well.
Well, it took one dead person for him to learn that,
Yeah, he was smart though, he was a genius.
One last question before we move on. Now, obviously, Goebbels at the moment is being portrayed as Hitler. How far does that mutation go? Has he still only got one ball?
He actually got a second smaller one attached. No. I'm really, the thing about the following year, very obviously Germany's going to lose the war because there's no...
Not again!
I would never, I do get to kill a lot of, I get to actually kill the people I would rather be killing in the fiction. That's like the other good thing about the year.
Well, we will segue onto a dialogue. The kids have gone now, which is a shame, but I've got lots of.
I was about to say, starting with Uber was a bad idea.
Well, going from something that you've spent so much time on and so much of your heart and soul into it, how does it differ working for something with, I dare say, plenty of restrictions like Stoles, particularly looking at that 25-issue Darth Vader run?
It's like, I've been a work for high writer since 2008 now, and all jobs have restrictions. And it's part of the, I come from a background in journalism, and that's kind of like, I've learned what is the job and what isn't the job. You come and you see stuff, and you go, okay, what am I meant to be doing here? in some ways I describe myself, it's like being an interior decorator. I've been brought into a house for a reason and I'm doing a job. You know, Michelangelo was an interior decorator.
Yeah.
You know, there's no shame there. But that's kind of...
Very well paid interior decorator.
It's like, I always joke it's like the Sistine Chapel, the idea of like, oh, it'll take me 3 years, and they're coming in 3 years, it's just Artex, you know. Anyway, so like going on DARTH, it's like I knew what the job was.
Yeah.
And so there was, that's kind of, the restrictions become the point. I mean, the point of Uber, or you know, the restrictions there, the fact I'm trying to do as accurate as I can make an alternate history. So there's the restrictions there and incredibly strong. In PHONOGRAM, my story about music is magic. You know, I can't just make fireballs happen. The entire point of that story is anything I do which is magical is something that music really does.
Yeah.
So in other words, I can't do a story unless I can work out a way that this magical effect is a metaphor. I can't do that story because that's the rules. And just because those rules are self-imposed does not mean those rules are as in any way as for, you know, any softer than the rules that you get for working for Lucasfilm. In this case, it's like I was asked to do Darth Vader. Actually, I was asked to do probably Darth Vader. If you've got an idea for something else in the period, you know, tell us. And I went away and thought about Darth Vader, and it was that kind of, I always view it as a historical novel. Like, you know where it starts, at the end of A New Hope, you know where it ends.
Yeah. Did you know it's going to be 25 issues though?
No, I knew the end. I mean, it was one of the things that you know the final shot of this story will be Darth Vader on the board, on the bridge of the Executor, saying, right, I'm off to find, you know, Luke Skywalker. That was always going to be the final shot because that's the only way that story could end. And for me, it was like, if you look at the things, I've said this before, but you know, end of A New Hope, Darth Vader is pretty much the sole survivor of the biggest military disaster of all time. A plan that's been, you know, 20 years the Emperor's been working on this. It was basically, you know, the plan, if you follow the movies, will take over the Republic, build a Death Star, and then dissolve the Senate, and now they will obey us because they're afraid of our enormous Death Star. But they've blown up the Death Star. This is literally the worst thing. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. Conversely, at the start of Empire, Vader is in a much more powerful position. He's in charge of the fleets. He's killing people randomly. He doesn't kill anyone in the first movie. You know, he's like, you know,
just the one person.
Yeah, it's like, he let him kill him. There's no kind of mutual. You know what I mean? So his position is much more powerful. So by implication, there is a fall and rise story. You know, Vader would have been low, and how does Vader regain his power? And that, for me, was the story. And of course, the other side is the other thing you realise that Vader realises in this period is that he has a son. At one point, he realises he must do. That's why he's chasing Luke. So in other words, he's just realised the last 20 years of my life have been a lie. So in other words, that's, you know, so you do the time reading, and that is the story. And it's kind of like, I was never not going to pitch a story that wasn't that. And that's why, you know, like if I pitched, I don't know, Darth Vader's Disco Adventures, you know what I mean? It's like, I would read it and I would write it, but it wouldn't be the job to pitch. So the actual major limitations for Star Wars were the self-imposed ones. But you know, there's always hard limits. As in, there's kind of like there's things you get no on. You know, and it's like, quite often, if something's being done in a movie, you know, like or in another medium, and I joke, it's like, obviously they don't tell us what's happening in the movies because you know it's so secret. But you kind of find out stuff by like playing battleships.
Okay.
You know, like you pitch something and you get a hard no for no reason, and you realize, okay, that's happening in a movie. You know, so you know, they've also the limitations there. And this is the thing always people forget about the Star Wars. They're also very giving back, as in the story. You know, not often, but I quite regularly in a script will say, okay, this is the crime boss character. You know, I can invent someone here, but if you've got like a crime boss from elsewhere in the canon you want to use, I can drop him in. Yeah. You know, they're very giving with ideas. As they may say, like, oh, we've got this character appearing in a video game in 2 years' time. If you want to use him, he's completely available. You know, and they extend the stuff I create.
Of course,
And it's like, it's very rewarding. What they're trying to do is incredibly rewarding for fans. As in, if you just buy any individual thing, that's great, because they're all individual stories. Yeah. But like people who buy a lot of stuff, they'll see the amount of work and thought they've got behind it, which is pretty inspiring. You know, so yeah, I've highly enjoyed working with them, and the fact that, you know, they're the only work for hire I'm doing at the moment kind of implies I must be enjoying it because I don't need to do it.
But on the flip side, of course, you did bring in, you know, the much loved, you know, 000, BT1, and Dr. Aphra, and so, you know, going back to, I suppose it's almost contradicting my first question. Clearly, there was a certain level of freedom that you're allowed to have, or was it just that the Lucasfilm guys thought, wow, this is a brilliant idea, let's stick these three in? clearly you couldn't have thought it would lead to Dr. Aphra having her own series, surely.
I thought you were always surprised when, you know, one character breaks that, and Aphra, you know, I hope people would like her, but that they liked her as much as they did was a surprise. I mean, the thing's like, Lucasfilm, as a kind of as a general sort of exercise, they want you to make stuff up, because Star Wars is a big universe, and that's kind of like the idea that you're always going to go to Tatooine and meet Jabba. No, you know, no, because that makes Star Wars small. They want basically the idea that whatever's through that door over there is interesting. Like every door in the cantina would lead somewhere cool, and that's kind of like what you do. So like, I spend most of my time in Star Wars working out how to do stuff that feels Star Wars. Whilst also being new. Like if you see the planets, I go, like when I invent a planet, it's always, okay, if it's a desert world, how can I make this desert world different? I mean, the current arc I'm doing in Star Wars has like part of it's on Mon Cala, which is the water planet where the Mon Calamari come from. So I do a lot of like TV documentary, Blue Planet like stuff there. And then there's another water planet elsewhere in the arc, and I go, okay, this one is covered in ice, this one's really cold, so it's like constantly got icebergs everywhere, it's constantly got stormy conditions, so it's kind of like hell. But you know what I mean, that's like, kind of like, okay, this ultimately has a different vibe. And that goes across the entire book. They want you to invent new people, at the same time, they're very into tying stuff together. I mean, it's the same with like Work for Hire in some ways, in that they kind of, when you're working for like the big two, they want your best ideas. They don't want you to play it safe, because you know it's like you look at the trailer for the next movie. You know, it's very clearly there's a lot of Jonathan Hickman's Avengers running there. It's like I recognise that scene. I recognise that scene.
Yeah.
And the point being is, you know, there's a line that definitely someone said is, you know, the comics are inventing the stuff the movies will be doing in 5 years' time. You know. And obviously the movies also feed back into the comics, but the real thing is, here is cool new shit. And the idea, like, if you genuinely want to see where the Marvel Universe is going, you pick up the comics. And you do, like, when I was pitching Uncanny X-Men, when I was pitching, like, all the books, you think big. You know, what's the big idea? And, you know, so the limitations are relatively few. And same in like Star Wars, they want more interesting.
Well, with Vader, you did think big. I really enjoyed the power levels we saw in Vader down. And it was interesting how they picked up on that, I think, in Rogue One, but with people who hadn't read the comic, they were I remember there was quite a lot of negative backlash the way he was presenting, he's not that, he's never done that sort of thing. And, you know, like you say, he doesn't kill anyone in the first film, he builds his power. There's things in the Force that weren't in the first film and the second film, and you're in sort of Last Jedi now, that are already being touched upon. But I really, really found your Vader, you know, strong and stable, shall we say, to really sort of enforce his power, a bit like she's doing in Syria at the moment. But that was the first time I'd seen that in comics. Now, did you know at the time, going back to the hard no and maybe no, did you know of his presentation, or did you even know he was going to be in Rogue One?
All that is tricky to talk about.
Okay.
There is a kind of a guiding line with Vader that he is just very hard. You know, as in, like, for me, like, as my guiding aesthetic when writing Darth Vader, in fact, in the series and any time he turns up elsewhere is, you should be scared when he's on, you know, you should be scared if he's on panel. You have no idea who's going to survive in that room with him. He could do, and that's the reason why we never did things like captions. You never see inside Darth Vader's. No. You know, you get one panel flashbacks, so you know what he's thinking of, but what does Vader really mean? For me, it's like the Punisher. There's a kind of fundamental distance from the Punisher you acquire. In the same way, you have a fundamental distance from Darth Vader. And that was kind of least. So the whole thing is about how frightening can you make him. So that to Vader down. I think the other way is, what is too much? It's like you've seen in the prequels, and so there's a lot of stuff that the Force has done across the whole canon. So we have quite hard limitations. There's definitely things we've suggested Vader does, which seems too much. You know, deciding what is too much is the thing. But, you know, like,
can you name an example
of
that? No,
I probably better not name stuff. But like, you know, they're all kind of arguments I can see. A lot of it's actually having, like, even when I'm surrounded by other people with guns, he just pulls the pins on their grenades. Yeah. That's not a major force move. That's not like a power move. That's just a kind of, I'll do this.
His fingers.
You know, and the fun about Vader is very good, and like he's a very good pilot. And, like,
do you miss writing him then? Do you miss writing him? There's always an opportunity to get him back in on the Star Wars comic, of course. Right. Okay. That's a hard no.
It's one of the things like, Vader is like I mean, he'll turn up in my Star Wars
Yeah.
comics because you've got to earn it. Like when Vader's not like the villain. He's not Skeletor. He's not.
No.
You know, if Vader turns up,
not.
you know, like it's not curses. You've got away again, Luke Skywalker. No, Vader turns up and everyone like basically feces everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, they should be petrified of this dude. But
He'd work well in Uber.
yeah, he's fun to write. I mean, the thing about Vader, Vader is just like this awful force of nature. And when I was writing the actual comic, like I woke up in the morning and basically had excitedly run downstairs and I work out something else Darth Vader can do with his force powers to kill somebody else. And that's kind of what the job is. Like almost an issue of Darth Vader should have Darth Vader is something really cool, which I haven't seen before, and that isn't too powerful, but it's the right level. Every issue should have something where Darth Vader does something which is very Darth Vader-y. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's great that you've also got those dark comedy moments, admittedly, but comedy moments at all. You know, otherwise it would be I imagine quite a tough read.
Yeah, I mean, like, the reason why I invented the cast, you know, was because we wanted to do a Star Wars book. And if you do an Empire-centric story, it's not a Star Wars book. By definition, an Empire-centric story is just a bunch of fascists. And these aren't fun. You know, these people are, you know, there's this grey, it's literally the jackboot stomping forever. So to actually make Vader even work in something that felt like Star Wars, with stories about comedy and capital R romance and all that kind of stuff, you have to like change the context of Darth Vader a bit, which is why he's the underdog. We invent people who are worse than him. I mean, I'm not actually worse than him in terms of like power, but worse than him in terms of ethics. There's a Robert McKee kind of argument about The Godfather, in that why do you root for The Godfather? Because you have these other mafia bosses who are much worse. And like, if I was a mafia boss, I would be that mafia boss. In that the same way it's a bit like with Darth Vader. As in, like, you make people, different evil people around him, and Darth Vader at least has some form of honour. He's not like Tag is just really boring. You know, Tag's a guy who runs off graphs, and he's killing just as many people. But there's no...
Great to see him in a comic though, I must admit.
There's no drama, you know, there's no drama to him, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's where the droids come from, and Afro comes from, and Black Chrysanthemum, in that I wanted, you know, one way to maintain the idea of making it feel Star Wars was just to simply invert the cast.
Yeah.
In other words, you know, especially with Darth Vader because he can't talk, you know, the more he talks, the less Darth Vader he is. So you're surrounded by people who can do the work of exposition, and you also find people who have that kind of group dynamic. Afro is kind of like, you know, Afro is kind of the Han Solo kind of aspect. She's more, but of course the dynamic, yeah, and of course Luke is Vader, and Vader is Luke. So you know, Vader takes the Luke role.
Yeah.
Afro takes all the hand role. The droids play the role they do similarly. When Trios turns up in the fourth arc, she's kind of like inverted Leia. In that, you know, she's saving them.
That.
You know, so there's a lot of those kind of mirroring aspects I do, because it's like, how can I make this feel like Star Wars whilst just changing everything?
And it does, and the thing is, you also added a bit of colour to the Empire as well. You know what I mean? I mean, it might be different shades of black, but nonetheless, you know, you create an Empire that isn't just boring. It's got a voice of its own, if you like.
We've met this character, me and Sice, actually no, it was me and Kev Walker, met the supporting character in Africa called Tolvan, and Tolvan we're basically running like just kind of the fugitive, but have you seen the movie Out of Sight? Out of Sight is basically criminal being chased by agents, and they sort of fell for each other.
Right.
So
So it's I hate you, I love you.
Yeah, as in that, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, but with like these two space lesbians. And Tolvan is like, she doesn't really care about the Empire. She's a career soldier.
Yeah.
You know, and like she has her lack of ethics is a problem. But the fact that you know, she'd be if the rebellion took over the galaxy, she'd be looking to work for them. I'm just a careerist, and that's, you know what I mean. The Empire's big. Like most, you know, a lot of people just need a job, and unfortunately, that doesn't make. Unfortunately, sometimes that's why. Okay, we look back to Uber. You know, people get dragged into these enormous machineries and choosing to not look at the ethics of it is itself a sin. You know. So there is like that.
Well, did any of the research that you did, so many years ago now for Uber, did that influence or colour your eye when you came to looking at the Empire, both in Darth Vader and in the ongoing Star Wars comic?
A bit, I'm always trying to work out that I lean materialist means Actually, plus it makes me an awkward fit occasionally in Star Wars, because I want things to make a lot more sense. And I mean like the best part, as in like Star Wars, especially A New Hope, is a fairy tale. That's the point
Oh,
of it.
of course,
And
it's
obviously
classic hero's quest.
The more I look at like A New Hope, the more weird that sort of little angles work in it. You know, it's what we say it's a classic hero's quest, but you know, the hero doesn't turn up for 20 minutes. You know, that's weird. You know, and it's not about a materialist battle. Conversely, the second you start, you know, when I say materialist, it's like why is what I mean. What's actually going on? Why are they doing this thing? And like my current Star Wars run, I'm at least it's kind of like the inverted of the Darth Vader run, because it's me looking at, you know, a New Hope to Empire.
Yes.
And a New Hope, the rebellion should be on the up, because not only does there be blown up the Death Star, now the rest of the universe knows about the Death Star, and they know the Empire would do that, and they know the Empire hasn't got it anymore. So this is the last chance. This might be the last chance to do anything about the Empire. You imagine recruitment being way up, you know, and you know and of course at the start of Empire, oh no, they're trapped on one crappy planet, so things have gone badly wrong. So that's kind of where I got towards. And also, what's their plan? You know, what's, you know, we're rebelling, quote unquote. What actually is the plan of rebellion? So. But that's what I end up doing.
Right. Like
I made my run is explicitly here's what we're trying to do to bring down the Empire, and also here's what we're trying to do in case they do something like a Death Star ever again. So like we fluked it. You know, a dude put a secret problem in the Death Star and eventually got it out, and we managed to get one guy getting a lucky shot. That's no way to run a railroad. You know, so that's kind of where I come from, and that's where everything goes to. So that's the bit. That kind of interlinks with Uber.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really say it's influenced by Uber. It's just kind of how I think. As in, like, I quite like stuff making sense. That always sounds more aggressive than I mean it, but I'm like, okay, why is somebody doing something? And
there's got to be a logic, a beat to it, I suppose.
I get very annoyed. I mean, I get annoyed in movies. I don't want to name any names. They're not actually Star Wars movies, actually. But there's quite often, like, I see people just doing the kind of this heroic sacrifice sort of structure, and very clearly, you know, your hero's quest stuff, and it's like, there's no reason they're actually doing this. You've just reached the point where somebody has to sacrifice themselves for that. This makes no, you know, and that drives me that frustration.
Well, I'm very much aware we've only got about 10 minutes left, and although we haven't got up on the Wicked and Divine, there might be some questions from the audience, so we can always come back to Wicked and Divine. But I want to just throw it back, see if there's any questions from the audience. I'm that good that I've covered everything, Leonard.
No, then I'll jump in. In terms of you going into Star Wars now and coming off Darth Vader, I find the tone between the two books very interesting, because you kind of come at Star Wars like epic canon. You seem to have a shit ton of fun doing Darth Vader.
Epic canon, there's a phrase. It's like the name for the Death Star. It's my epic canon.
That's your epic. But with the creation of the characters that you did for Darth Vader, it seemed like you were just, like you say, you were bouncing down the stairs. Do you feel that you kind of lost that going into Star Wars, or is it just a different approach to the titles?
It's like, I think when I started Darth Vader, people thought I had the hard job. Like, you know, doing a Star, you know, Jason had the easy job, because Jason, he gets to write Star Wars characters.
Yeah.
Have fun, you know, like they exist, they're all that. Conversely, I think I had the easy job. I mean, my job involved making more stuff up. But my point being is I was able to make stuff up, and by definition made it new. So in other words, there's much more limitations in terms of character in Star Wars. So in other words, not least the number of characters. You have like, you know, Jason mainly made Luke lead. And like, in the same, Luke's the lead, Han and Leia are the main supporting characters, the droids and Chewie are kind of like tertiary supporting characters. But that's still writing a team book. You know, that's like writing the X-Men. And writing the X-Men, I mean, I wrote a nine-person X-Men team, which is not a smart thing to do. And there's tactics you can do for that. And that, in other words, if I'm basically developing 3 characters, because I kind of made Leia my co-lead, and Han is quite forward as well, that's 3 characters. So there's less room to make stuff up. And I'm looking for more ways to support characters' arcs. So in other words, a lot of the supporting cast who come in, are there to form that purpose, and the purpose is smaller. Like, you don't get a character the size of Afro, because I haven't got room for a character the size of Afro. And like, I dropped Sana as well, because I want, like, Sana does come back into the book, but like, I wanted the to really carefully delineate my three main leads' journey in the first like 12, 18 issues. That kind of, okay, this is where Luke is, this is where Luke's going, this is where Han is, this is where Han's going. I mean, Han, you know, I said earlier, at the end, in A New Hope, Han is, you know, he is the complete random rogue dude, which is, but you know, at the start of Empire, Leia says, you know, you're born commander of men. It's like, is he? I haven't seen that. And that kind of like, you know, Han reluctantly being dragged, you know, that's the kind of like connective tissue. Oh yeah, and they've all got really high ranks. I mean, like, Han hasn't. But like, you know, Luke's a commander, I think, at the start of Empire.
Oh, he's still Han's still a general.
Yeah, well, yeah, a general by the end, though.
Yeah.
Like, no, he's not a general at the start of Empire. But the point being is, like, that's where I'm digging. So the limitations that are tighter, but it's the sort of thing where when people see where I'm actually going with it, they'll say, oh no, Kieron's having fun with that. And like, the big arc I start on issue 50 is, you know, it's enormous and seismic, and oh yeah, that's Kieron Gillen doing Kieron Gillen things.
I do want to get a question on WicDiv then, very quickly. I know that we're running out of time, and I don't want to get a quick.
No, definitely. It's weird. It's my most successful book, and I remember talking about it all.
There was an excellent post by Jamie in the last week or so, talking about his redrawing of page 1 from the first issue and redrawing it again for a recent upcoming issue, and the evolution of his art. How do you see the evolution of your writing for WicDiv from that first issue to where you are at the moment? What would you say is the fundamental evolution of what you've done?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, if I've seen...
I come up with once a week.
That's pretty good. I'm impressed. Jamie has... I'm in... Because the fact we're in the last year of WicDiv, I'm in a quite contemplative state in terms of what I've actually learned from this enormous piece. I mean, the reason why Jamie redrew certain panels and re-inked other panels, which is interesting, because it was just the inks, and he redrew certain panels for reasons which anyone who reads issue 35 will see. So, like, I mean, that's also, I mean, Jamie on the original phonogram, he wants to go back and change the first issue a bunch, because there was stuff he wanted to fix, and by the time he got to the end of issue 6, he realised, I can't do that, my style in this period has changed so much, any fixes I do would look really weird, I'd have to redraw the whole issue, and hey, I'm not doing that. In the case of me, I'm not sure. There's one thing like my methodology with Jamie, and to a lesser degree everyone else, has got so fluid, it's a bit worrying. The way I write scripts now, like, I'm not writing Alan Moore scripts anymore. I'm always writing stuff that cannot be written. And I mean that in a kind of, like, you know what I mean? They're certainly not drawn, as in I'm writing amorphous conversations in terms of like, okay, we try this and this, or maybe we go this way. Like, I'm not telling Jamie what to do. This is much more like, I'm going to use, okay, literally see Matt Fraction in a burst from behind me and hit me. It's more like jazz. You know, as in my scripts are like really weird and open and like conversational and existing to be rewritten. Like, I write the script and then Jamie draws it, and I will change significant things at lettering, and I will that. And there's also a sense of the actual the complexity of some of the stuff. Like the next issue is like, I mean, it's killing Jamie at the moment, but it's grotesquely ambitious.
I mean, you can also see that with the actual book itself. I mean, the first couple of the first arc, you can almost do a one-sentence pitch of it. It's the gods returning as rock stars.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do it. You can't do that with this latest art. You can't sum it up in one sentence. It cannot be done.
It's like us trying to do the actual the recap page at the start of the issue. That's a hell of a time. It's like I'm just like, okay, we try because we kind of get it down. But you're right, it's a really complicated story. And it was always, the funny thing is, WicDiv is entirely based upon me 4 years ago. By which I mean, we planned all this. And like anybody who follows WicDiv can see that we must have known the stuff we were showing then.
Yeah.
So in other words, whilst this entire structure is there, the execution and how we choose to approach things and what darlings I kill, that's the kind of like, it's like there's a degree of character growth for me, by which I mean there's some stuff. The hardest stuff is, same with Uber, is the stuff I decided like 4 years ago or 10 years ago in the case of Uber, I just don't agree with anymore. or I think, no, this is problematic in a way which I don't like. In which case, it's a question of like working out how I execute this in a way which I find more bearable. And there's things which, you know what I mean? As in like, there's stuff, especially early phonogram, the stuff I did then, I find embarrassing and unforgivable now. Like, yeah, as in like, there's a degree of autobiography in my early phonogram, which is crass and dislikable, and I, you know, hide more and more of it in fiction. And that's kind of, you know, WicDiv is in a similar way in terms of like, I actually want to not go to the places I thought I wanted to go to. But yeah, I would say, generally speaking, I'm a much more fluid to the level of weirdness writer. As in, I no longer write pages. Like, I mean, I do pages, but when I'm writing an issue, I'm writing the whole issue. Like, I'm just doing, okay, I'll do a page. Exactly, yes, I'm a page. It's what, I've seen a 3D printer work.
Yeah.
I occasionally work like a 3D printer. Like, you do the whole thing, you go back and forward, and it eventually builds and performs the script. And it's not that my scripts are getting any smaller, but like, there are definitely a level of to it. In that, no, as in, I clearly have a way that I think will work, but my openness to what Jamie may want to do with a page is considerable, I guess, and that's probably the main way. I think I'm kinder now. So?
Is anything happening with the TV series?
Not that I can talk about. It's like TV stuff is TV stuff. So it's one of those things like, you know, it's one of those things like TV stuff happens at TV time, and there's various like stuff that's happening, and my agent will be speaking to me about it. But really, like, me and Jamie don't think about it very much. Mainly because I'm killing Jamie with scripts. It's one of those things that we just occasionally get calls from Hollywood people, and we, you know, have that. But you know, you never know. Like, we're still kind of optimistic, and there's still really interesting people like involved.
You are Douglas Adams with your Hitchhikers. 25 years, 30 years.
That's the thing. It's like, you know, it's like, look at all the stuff. Imagine all the stuff that Neil's doing. When was that bought? You know, it's like TV stuff works at TV time.
It's there now, isn't it? It'll always be there. Yeah. It's all kicking off in The Wicked and the Divine at the moment, isn't it? And sort of people maybe we thought they were more innocent than they look aren't as such. I love the specials because obviously they do fill in the gaps, they do give us the clues. Were the specials always part of the plan then, or were they, like you say, this jazz sort of idea of writing? Are they things you thought, you know what, this would work really well? Or did you have the Roman Empire 1923 at the back of your mind, or even the forefront of your mind?
It's kind of like, you know, that I was, the fact we mentioned the romantic pantheon in issue 2 implies that we knew it then. And it's like, I always knew we wanted to do more pantheons.
Yeah.
And that was always part of, anyone's doing like a 5-year Vertigo model series, you've got to have an idea that's big enough. That means that if you've got, say, Transmetropolitan or Sandman or Preacher or any of those kind of big long runs, the model of the series is flexible enough so the writer and the artist's changing interests can be folded in. So in the case of like WicDiv, I want to talk about art for all human history. Yeah. So in other words, any story idea I could do, I could fold into WicDiv. So in other words, that aspect was, in terms of the specific execution of the specials, as interstitials between arcs, no. I think that came by when we were looking at our schedule, right, and we realised this would be a really good way of actually making it work. And of course, after Commercial Suicide, we also realised there's a justification in removing Jamie as the artist. Because of course Persephone's dead. You know, so having a different artist there makes sense on some level, but at the same time, there is a smaller cognitive leap for characters you've never seen before, drawn by different artists, than characters you have seen before. So in other words, we end up like recruiting the artists solely for the period. Like, you know, Stephanie Hand's doing the Romantics because she's an astounding, you know, she gets a real sense of over drama. And Andre doing the Roman because I really needed something more draw triumph, you know, and Ord in 1923 and so on. Because Ord was, you know, she had that kind of cool modernist vibe to her. So yeah, it's one of the things that the plan is. I say it's all incredibly planned, but it's more like you know the landmarks.
Yeah.
Like okay, I could tell you at the start what would happen at the end of every trade. So these are the kind of the big narrative beats. Conversely, so much of like the detail and the routes between is complicated. I mean, like I knew all the characters' arcs. I said this character's main problem is this. Their secret is this. And then but when that comes out, this and this will happen. But I couldn't always tell you when those secrets would come to the boil. There's a secret about bowl in the current issue, and I was thinking that was probably Imperial Phase, as in there's stuff with Baphomet, and Morrigan. I just thought that, like, there's this issue 37, which is their issue. I thought maybe that could have been issue 23.
Okay.
Like, you know, when I was, like, I knew I had all the material, but how you choose to mix it, you know,
Yeah.
that was the job. And that's why it's interesting, because if you plan it all at the start, it's just typing for 5 years, and that's no good either.
So does music, I mean, you mentioned this sort of methodology of jazz writing, and of course you did the remix.
Please stop saying jazz.
No, okay, yeah, right, jazz hands. No, but music obviously influences your work, and I think it influences a lot of people. And I think it's really great that as a writer, you brought that to the forefront, I think. How does it influence, if at all still, the way you approach the wicked and the divine?
It's how you think about stuff. I mean, it's like, I'm just obsessed by music, and I always have been. It's such an enormous emotive part of me.
You're literally the only person who knows this is a band name, by the way, so I was very impressed.
You're just a big fan. You're a big fan of North East New York. You know? Yeah, it's a useful metaphor, especially like, you know, someone like me and I'm obviously friends like Warren Ellis and Matt Fraction, and like especially the time we were coming in, you can talk analogously as an effect which happens in music, which you can mirror in comics. And you can't really mirror it one for one because they're different mediums, but that kind of feeling you're looking for.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, you know, and comics for me is its best as a bastard medium. Comics is best when it takes from other forms, and as opposed to just taking from itself, because then it gets very inbred. So for me, music is a way of thinking, and a way of like, I've got this idea that pop songs, especially where you have both lyrics and music, are interesting by idea, because lyrics aren't poetry. How a lyric combines with a sound, combines with how it's sung, creates an actual meaning. And for me, that is so much about how I think about pages, or lines of dialogue, or like juxtaposition of art, which art is a general, in-specific thing, and makes people feel stuff, as in just how Jamie's characters are drawn, versus a specific line of dialogue, and that's all about the juxtaposition. And the same way pop music is about juxtaposition. I'm also very interested in like pacing, and rhythm, and mood, and effect, and these kind of these intangibles. So it's my love of music. It's just with my love of games. I mean, like if you look at, say, Uber, very clearly you could run it as a war game. It's that kind of like, these are different modes of thinking. I talked about my materialism. So my poetic side is always about the music, but it's also about how music creates tempo and rhythm, and like, if I'm thinking about fight scenes, I'm always thinking about music.
So you actually listen to music as you're writing, because I find,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't. I mean, I've got this enormous WicDiv playlist, and normally if I'm writing WicDiv, that's on shuffle.
Okay.
And I kind of use it as a tarot deck. Like, and occasionally I'm deliberately skipping through it because I want to hit a Morrigan song or a Baphomet song or whatever. But quite often it's just shuffling. And it's also, the fact I'm listening to this enormous playlist when I'm walking around London, I'm also thinking, anytime I listen to that playlist, I'm thinking about WicDiv. So due to the signifiers in the record, and the way the random shuffle happens, I'm thinking about different characters or different moments in the story pressed against each other, so I get insight into character or scenario or plotting. So this, using music as a way to mix up my thinking and allow, you know what I mean? So once everything is planned, it's like, how can these elements be best combined? So that's kind of like, when WicDiv over, part of my dismount, because I know it's going to be very weird for me, I'm going to do like writer's notes on all the songs. So it's like over 500. So like, this is part of my,
this is another book in itself, surely.
Yeah, as in like, I think at the end of WicDiv I can afford to basically take a month off to sort of like lie on the floor and, oh my god, I'm not doing WicDiv anymore. You know, and it's like ways to emotionally detach from something, because it's like,
well, it came from an emotional place, so I dare say it'll end up in an emotional place.
It was a machine designed to torture and heal me, and this really scary thing about WicDiv, it works. And actually that links back to your question in terms of like what you've learned, in that WicDiv was also designed to teach. As in, like, it starts quite simple, and the end of year 4, it's something else. It's, for me, it's like a degree. It's like, it's deliberately designed for me to try to tell people, this is every single mistake I've ever made, and this is every single mistake which hopefully you don't need to do this stuff. Be better than me. And it's kind of like, I want to, it's, you know, part of it's about wanting to trying to encourage people who want to be creators, and also please don't make these mistakes, and if you do, recognise them. So that, even the 4 years is like a degree course, as I'm aware of. Like, there's actually some readers, the younger readers, who started like, you know, quite young.
Yeah, of course.
And like there's people who started university at 18 and now are leaving university, and it's like, it's been such a, I mean, I remember that period.
And that's a big part of your demographic, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, like, and that's it, to be part of a meaningful a meaningful stage of anybody's life. That's the thing about actually reading a comic as it's going out, whether it's monthly or individual issues. It's part of your life. That's kind of like, I remember comics I was buying it every month, like Next Wave. 2005 was a terrible year for me, really, really awfully bad. And Next Wave was basically one of the few things that gave me joy. And like, especially with WicDiv when they've got such a community there, and you see the actual interactions inside the community and the friendships that they've found, that's really very powerful. It's like it's a band. It's like basically we've been on tour for 5 years, and now we have to split up. It's very weird.
That's a great place. I would have asked you if you're still enjoying your Imperial phase, but I'll have to be for another. Kieron Gillen, thank you very much for your time, and I'm glad I squeezed an extra quarter hour on because I did want to talk about WicDiv, so I'm very, very pleased we were able to touch on that. And you do give great pleasure to a lot of readers, and thank you for your time in today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.